Welcome back to another manufacturer video, and today we're talking about extremes. Every manufacturer has a catalog, and if they're smart, they'll sell thrill coasters when the parks want that, and they'll sell coasters for the little ones when that's in demand also. That's not always the case, but that's why we're here. This is part 1 of a 2-part series looking at every manufacturer's biggest and smallest coaster. Let's start with aerodynamics. They built 98 coasters, the first one in 1959, the last one in 2002, and their biggest coaster isn't cut and dry. If you want the longest, it's Desperado at Buffalo Bills Resort and Casino. That's over 5,800 feet long and has a 225-foot drop. If you want the tallest, it's Big One at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. That stands 213 feet tall. But for this video, I'm focused on the biggest drop, and for that, you have to go to Kennywood for Steel Phantom. That had a 225-foot drop just like Desperado, but that was extended 3 feet after Morgan renovated it and reopened it as Phantom's Revenge. Not sure if that counts, so if you want, you can call this a 2-way tie, or 3-way if you want to include Big One. As for the smallest, Aero never made kiddie coasters, but they did design the mini mine train at Six Flags Over Texas. That only stands 20 feet tall, barely 900 feet long. Located right across from another Aero, the Runaway Mine Train, and gracing this park since 1969. Next up, B&M. They started in 1990, built 127 coasters, and they've always had the idea of going big or going home. They own the world's tallest coaster that has a lift hill, Fury 325, obviously 325 feet tall, 320-foot drop, and for my money, it's their best coaster. As for their smallest coaster, you might think it's one of their family inverts, maybe Penguin Trek at SeaWorld Orlando, but those are over 60 feet tall. Nemesis at Alton Towers is only 42 feet tall, but because it's built into the ground, it has a 104-foot drop. The smallest coaster is at Legoland in Germany. Their new wing coaster, Maximus, Flight of the Guardian. That's only 55.8 feet tall and has a very shallow drop into a helix. It's a family coaster that has 2 inversions, so that's something different. Custom Coasters International, or CCI, built 34 coasters between 1992 and 2002, and the fight for the top spot is razor close. At 122 feet, we have Shivering Timbers at Michigan's Adventure and the Boss at Six Flags St. Louis. Shivering Timbers is about 700 feet longer, but the Boss has a bigger drop. After it falls to the ground, it levels out and drops even more, so it's listed with a 150-foot drop and claims the title as the world's biggest CCI. On the other side, they made a couple coasters for families. Kingdom Coaster, Zach Zoomer, also a weird one like Lost Coaster at Indiana Beach. That was a dark ride retrofit as a wooden coaster, and that would win except for one other, the Underground at Adventureland. This is barely a coaster, more of a dark ride, and this only rises up 15 feet, using 2 lift hills to achieve it. Great Coasters International, or GCI, is still in operation, their first coaster being built in 1996, and they've won up CCI with 35 coasters so far. Some people might think Wodan at Europa Park is their biggest, but they'd be wrong. For that, you have to go to China and Night Valley for Wood Coaster, rising up the side of a mountain and working its way down, 147 feet tall and having a 131-foot drop. That's about the same as Wodan, but Wood Coaster has it ever so slightly in height. GCI also has a collection of small-scale family wooden coasters, but one stands below the rest. White Lightning at Fun Spot Orlando, Heidi the Ride, Wicker Man, Invader. Those are all over 70 feet, but White Lightning is just below 70 feet, a 67.2-foot drop. So as of now, White Lightning can claim the title as the smallest GCI. Keeping the wooden coaster theme, the Gravity Group started up when CCI folded, its engineers starting the new firm, and since 2005, they've designed 29 coasters. They actually started big, and then have been trending small. Hades 360 stands 136 feet tall and drops 140 feet into a tunnel, right under the Mount Olympus parking lot. That was their first coaster, but their second coaster was even bigger, and to this day, still their biggest. The Voyage at Holiday World stands 159 feet tall, has a 154-foot drop, and then has an insane layout over 6,400 feet of track. Lately, they've been focusing on their family coasters, and their first one just happens to be the smallest of the bunch. Wooden Warrior at Quasi is only 32 feet tall, 36-foot drop, just over 1,200 feet of track, and it just proves the Gravity Group doesn't build bad rides. Gerstlauer is a German company dating back to 1981, their first coaster coming in 1996, and they've put up 111 around the world. There's one that stands above the rest and it's not even close. Schwer des Karnen at Hansa Park. This has an indoor vertical lift, standing 239.5 feet tall. The drop maxing out just short of 220 feet, going into a 4,000-foot layout. This is a bucket list coaster, and it's unlike anything they've ever built. Hang Time is a distant second place, standing 150 feet tall. Their smallest coaster is a shared title, the 11 coasters they call their Kiddie Racer model. These are all in Europe, and honestly, I've seen K'NEX coasters bigger than this. It's only 5.8 feet tall, having a twisted drop, a triangle-shaped airtime hill, and turns back to the station. The best thing is, this is a one-person car. This is totally a backyard coaster. It's just in actual theme parks and built by a major manufacturer. Giovanola only has 3 to choose from, so the difference between first and last is, well, one coaster. Goliath and Titan have the same first drop, but Titan at Six Flags Over Texas stands 10 feet taller, 245 feet. Plus, it's got more track with the extra helix, so all around, this is the biggest. That just leaves Anaconda at South Africa's Gold Reef City. That's the smallest at 111.6 feet, a bizarre version of a B&M invert with only 2 across trains, and it looks like a lot of fun. Still, the smallest Giovanola. PAX is a Russian manufacturer that started in 1988. They've built 41 coasters, mostly in Asia, nothing in America, and their biggest is Cobra at VWC Wheel Park in China. This has a weird track, almost looks like a single rail, but it's not. It just has a thick spine. It pulls you back, and it has a long train, so if you're in the front, you barely get the drop at all. But that spike stands 150.9 feet tall, and that makes it the tallest PAX. It's like a shuttle loop, hitting another vertical spike and dropping back into that loop. This hasn't been in operation since 2015. For the smallest, it's their Puss in Boots kiddie coasters. The smallest one being at Pervomaisky Park at 21.3 feet, going up a lift, twisting down into a camelback, twisting around and ending underneath that camelback. A very aesthetically pleasing kids coaster. Hopkins is an American company that built 7 coasters between 1985 and 1996. They have a bunch of coasters fighting for the top spot, but the winner is Dragon at Adventureland. This was taken out in 2019, but it stood 90 feet tall with an 85-foot drop, the same height as Cliffhanger at Ghost Town Village. That's also 90 feet, but hasn't operated since 2010. Dragon is about 200 feet longer, so I'll give it the edge. Desert Storm at Castles and Coasters is also 90 feet tall, but that drop is only 80 feet. They have their moderate-sized loopers, but they also have the stuff for kids. The smallest coaster is Patriot at Castles and Coasters, going up a 30-foot tire lift, spiraling down 710 feet of track. A very good family/kiddie coaster, and even kind of packs a punch. Just watch out for that 118-degree Phoenix heat. Jinma Rides started in 1961, and they used to build those terrible toboggan coasters. Luckily, none of those made this list. They built 44 coasters in total, and their biggest is opening this year in Arizona. Hot Wheels Twin Mill Racer at Mattel Adventure Park. This took over for Lightning Run. 116 feet tall, it's gonna have a launch in 4 inversions, 2,500 feet of track. This could be the best new coaster coming to America this year, and it's the biggest Jinma Rides has ever done. Their smallest is actually 4 different coasters, these being part of the Big Dipper model. Joust at Dutch Wonderland, Woodstock Express at Michigan's Adventure, Wile E. Coyote's Canyon Blaster at Six Flags Over Texas, and Gold Rush at Wild Adventures. This stands 16.1 feet tall, using a spiral lift and twisting around its plot a couple times until the ride ends. Jinma is a Chinese manufacturer that's built 387 coasters, most of them being in China. They make coasters that look like knockoffs of more common models. That's definitely true of their biggest coaster, Vertical Roller Coaster at Great Jingdong Tourist World in China. That stands 196.9 feet tall, dropping 161.7 feet, 1 inversion, almost 2,700 feet of track. And it looks a lot like a dive coaster, but despite its name, that drop isn't quite vertical. As for the shortest, a lot of their coasters aren't listed with an official height, but there is Fruitworm Pulley at Hangzhou Children's Park in China. This is just a tiny hill that drops into an apple, and that's it. It stands 4.3 feet tall. The train is almost as long as the ride, so that's something. Mack Rides dates back to 1780, their first coaster opening almost 200 years later in 1958, and they have 167 coasters under their belt. They used to make small coasters in wild mice, but lately, they're pushing the limits. They broke their own record in 2017 with DC Rivals in Australia, then topped that with Beyond the Cloud in China in 2022, and they're doing it once again in 2024, Hyperia at Thorpe Park. Their latest Hyper is going to stand 236 feet tall, a compact swooping layout full of great elements. Airtime, hang time, lateral whip. It's not the longest ride, but it's got the title as the biggest, at least for now. Mack Rides keep surprising us. I said Mack was not short on small coasters, and as far as I can tell, the smallest of the small is Carrara at Mendoria in Poland. This indoor power coaster has some great theming, and even though it has almost 1,000 feet of track, it only stands 15.4 feet tall. Maurer is a German company that was founded in 1876. There are 68 coasters kicking off in 1996, and their biggest is one that everyone seems to love to hate: Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket at Universal Studios Florida. Apparently, Maurer only got this job because B&M was too busy, or B&M was too expensive. Either way, Maurer had to do something outside their comfort zone, and they built this vertical lift X-Car coaster 167 feet tall. This is about 15 feet taller than a Skyloop model, 10 of those operating around the world. As for the smallest, I don't know exactly how tall this coaster is, but it looks to me like it takes the cake. This is Twistrix at Drievallee Family Park in the Netherlands, a family coaster with spinning cars. If I had to guess, I'd say this is maybe 20 or 25 feet. Regardless, it looks shorter than the coaster with the shortest listed height, Sea Stallion at Six Flags Qiddiya, 32.8 feet. Morgan made 8 coasters between 1996 and 2004. 9 if you count their work on Phantom's Revenge, but we already saw that coaster for aerodynamics. Does it count for Morgan or not? Who knows? It doesn't matter. Their tallest coaster is Steel Dragon 2000 at Nagashima Spaland, standing a whopping 318.2 feet. The drop being a mere 306.8 feet. Morgan loves to go big. More than half their coasters stand at least 200 feet. Steel Dragon 2000 was once the tallest in the world, and it remains the longest. The only non-alpine coaster to clear 8,000 feet. That is, until Falcon's Flight opens. They don't always go big. They have a couple weird one-offs. That includes the Santa Monica West Coaster, standing only 55 feet tall, but that's not the smallest. For that, we stay in California but head up the coast. Quicksilver Express at Gilroy Gardens. This is the one and only Morgan mine train, using the terrain very well, and only standing 38 feet. Despite its size, it's the star of Gilroy Gardens and a very good coaster. Last one for part 1. Let's finish off with Intamin. Founded in 1967, their first coaster opening in 1979, and 185 worldwide. You could argue that nobody's been more innovative than Intamin, especially over the last 25 years. Because of that, you get coasters like the aforementioned Falcon's Flight. That's going to have a max height of 639.8 feet, a max drop of 519 feet, and those are records that will be hard to break. This could open along with Six Flags Qiddiya this year, or maybe next year, or maybe not at all. No other manufacturer has gone over 400 feet tall, but Intamin has done it 3 times. Superman Escape from Krypton at 415 feet, Top Thrill 2 at 420 feet, and the previous champ, King Ka at 456 feet. On the other side, the first coaster I mentioned that came back in 1979, Wilderness Run at Cedar Point, that's only 19 feet tall and second to last. The smallest is about half that size, Montaña Rusa Infantil at Parque de la Ciudad in Argentina. At 9.8 feet tall, it's a kids coaster with no cross ties in the rails. I've never seen anything like that before, and this was opened between 1982 and 2008. That's a wrap on part 1 of this 2-part series. Let me know if anything looks off here, or if you have any thoughts on these rides. Some coasters don't have their official stats listed, so if you know of something that I got wrong, let me know in the comments below. Stay tuned next week for part 2, where we look at RMC, Premier, SNS, Schwarzkopf, Vekoma, and a whole mess of other manufacturers. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you're new here and love coaster content, please give me a sub. I have a playlist with other manufacturer videos. Also, check out my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage, and my baseball channel if you also happen to love baseball like me. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.